Prime.
Hello, people. I'm Prime, and with me I have. What's your name?
What, you don't know my name anymore? You forgot, yeah? Okay. No, it's Rachel, guys. How you doing? The Devil's Avocado. Remember me?
Exactly, and we're here for a well, as you probably already saw by the title of the stream and everything, McFred breakdown, because apparently, from what we hear, McTominay is the one holding Fred back, and he's this top class midfielder.
Oh,
so
Prime, honestly. It's not going to be a slanderous stream, guys. Nothing like that. As much as Prime would like it to be, it's not going to be a slanderous.
I'm not slandering. We've got actual, breakdown and stats here. So, I mean, look, we know Rachel's not the best with the eye test, but let's see what she can do.
What a troll. All right. We do have Bits and Bobs joining us very, very soon. He's obviously.
I saw that.
Oh, actually, let me hold on for everyone to see.
No, we're not. We're not doing this here.
Latimus mime, everyone. Yeah, so we're gonna go through McFred, the good, the bad, and the ugly sort of thing. Like I said, Bix and Bob is going to join us soon. He plays as a midfielder, so we want to get his experience and sort of his views on it as well. Like I said, it's not a slanderous sort of stream. It's just going to be us sort of discussing the good and the bad from them, what we think we need sort of an upgrade in sort of those areas, a bit of a comparison with some stats, because obviously a lot of people prefer stats. And obviously get in the comments if you agree, if you disagree, if I've missed something out, just let me know, or let me and Prime know, and we can discuss it. And if we have time, maybe a couple of callers to sort of discuss whatever they want to discuss regarding McFred.
Mm-hmm. Maybe even a certain Doncaster fan.
Right. Let's get started. So, just going to have a look at a couple of their player profiles. McTominay is 25 years old. He can play as a central midfielder, CDM, or centre back. Really, there should be a star next to CDM because he's not actually a holding midfielder. He is an 8, in my opinion. He's right-footed, obviously plays for Man United, and he's Scottish. Looking at his strengths and weaknesses, this is something that people could probably agree and disagree on or whatever. We know that he can shoot. He's got a good shot on him. He's got engine. He runs around. He does it for 90 minutes, just like Fred. He is quite press resistant. He's very good at picking up the ball and sort of turning with it. The problem with him is sort of his distribution, I would say. We know he's physical, in the air and, on the ground in terms of, his strength. We know that he's a big boy. He's disciplined. He's actually gotten better at this, throughout the season. He tends to hold his position a lot more. And he will cover players in sort of the wider areas when necessary. And he is aggressive. His weaknesses include passing, dribbling. He's quite rash in the tackle sometimes. His vision and creativity is lacking. And he's quite error prone. Not as obvious as Fred in terms of, making passing mistakes, but he's quite error prone in terms of his positioning at times. But like I said, he has improved, but it's still a weakness for me. In terms of stats, I don't want to read out all the stats because I know there's a lot of stats in this, but I want people to just have a look at a few things. I've basically compared players in the Premier League because everyone's against the same sort of opposition. There's a couple of players we're linked with in the Premier League, so it should be interesting to look at in a few moments. But in the Premier League, he scored 4 goals and he's assisted once. His general pass success is quite high overall. He's not great with long passes or key passes, but his actual percentages in terms of overall pass completion is quite high. He's not great at interceptions, and his tackling is pretty average, and he doesn't get dribbled past often. He also doesn't dribble often, but when he does, there's a 74% success rate. So stats-wise, I'd say, like, on paper, his passing stats are decent, but there's more to passing than just completing the pass. You've got to look at weight or pass and sort of if it's progressive, sideways passing. If you play a whole game 100% pass rate and you've got and you're just doing sideways passes, it doesn't really mean anything. You know, it's just standard sideways passing. He tends to do that quite a lot. Most of his passes are not actually that progressive. And when you look at his heat map, you can see he covers a lot of ground. He usually plays on the right side of the pivot with Fred in general. So, you know, the right side of the pitch is very, very dark.
He plays on the... That's weird, because he's left-footed.
McTominay is not left-footed. He's right-footed.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Fred. Never mind.
No. This is McTominay.
My bad. Sorry.
Lucky time. It's because they have the same sort of weaknesses at times, so you just got confused. But yeah, that's McTominay. And then we look at Fred. Again, his strengths, you know, he has an engine. He does press very well, especially higher up the pitch. His tackling has an asterisk next to it, because while he tackles quite often in the game, he's also extremely rash, and sometimes he slides for no reason, which is really annoying. We're going to see a few pictures of that in a moment. His weak foot, he actually does have a good weak foot when he controls the ball. I know what you're going to say. He's got a bad first touch, etc. But when he dribbles, he actually dribbles with both feet. So he does use both of his feet very well. There are very few players that can effectively dribble with both feet. And he is aggressive. Again, we know he's a tenacious sort of player. In terms of weaknesses, I'm going to put his passing in there. I know a lot of people think that he's a good passer. I disagree. I think that when it comes to sort of Fred, he doesn't make enough progressive passes in a game. And when he does, he tends to find them very, very late. And when you're playing against low blocks, he does struggle with his passing. It's all well and good being able to pass into space, which he did at Shakhtar, and which he does when we counter-attack against big teams. But against low blocks, this is where you really see if someone can pass the ball. And for me, both Fred and McTominay lack in this area. Aerial duels, he's not the biggest of players, so he's going to be poor in the air. In general, he doesn't have a great leap on him. He is error-prone. We've seen a few of them this season. He's got a very poor first touch, which does lead to errors. His shooting, well, we don't need to speak about his shooting. His shooting is generally quite poor, and sometimes his awareness lacks as well. So a few overlapping weaknesses and strengths with McTominay. But yeah, that's Fred overall. Oh, Bits and Bobs is joining the stream. If he can connect.
Yeah, bro.
Bobs.
Yeah, how you doing? You okay?
Good. How are you doing?
We're good.
Can you hear me okay? Can you see me in that, yeah?
Yeah, we can see and hear you.
Yeah.
Finally, I'm connected. Sorry I'm late. Where
It's
are
alright.
we?
No worries.
We're just going through Fred and McTominay's profiles, you know. Nothing major yet, don't you worry.
Okay.
But thank you for coming on, Bobs. Really
No,
appreciate it.
Don't be silly.
Yeah. So how are you doing though? You good?
Yeah, it's football training. Literally back training. So YouTube is unfortunately taking a bit of a back seat, and obviously I'm doing uni. So yeah, I'm good. I'm good. When you asked, I was like, okay, no problem. It's all good.
Yeah. Thank you, Bobs.
To help you out. So yeah, Prime Alpha.
No, we good. How about you?
I do, man. It's tough, bro.
Right.
It's tough. Right. Okay. Let's go.
Yeah, obviously, guys, if you don't know, Bobs is next Ballon d'Or winning midfielder. So he's gonna.
But he's not better than Fred. He's not better than Fred.
No, because Fred's getting paid a lot of money.
Yeah. So yeah, Fred, we can see on the map he actually covers a lot more ground than McTominay. Look at the red spots, and they're huge.
Yeah, but you know why that though, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, Fred is tenacious, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's an ankle biter. You know, he likes to press. He's good off the ball. He's very good. He presses. He has a lot of energy. You know, you look at the way he's built. He's not the tallest. You know, he's very mobile and agile. He's annoying. You know, he's a menace and he's very tenacious. So
yeah,
it makes sense with that heat map. You know.
Absolutely, I agree. In terms of these passing stats, like we said before with McTominay, passing is on paper it looks good, like 88% pass rate, whatever. His key passes again they lack, to be honest with you, just like McTominay. McTominay's is worse, but McTominay is the sitter. Long balls, not a long passer at all. Accurate passes in own half and opposition half, between 85 and 90%. So pretty good there. Loses possession 10 times. Interceptions per 90. and tackles per 90 are higher than McTominay's. So he's much better at getting the ball off of the opposition team. He gets dribbled past 1.9 times per 90, and successful dribbles are 0.9, 81%. Sorry, he doesn't actually dribble that often, just like McTominay, but he's 81% effective when he does do it. So overall, they're pretty average stats. I know, like, you can go deeper and go for progressive passes and do all that, but I didn't want to make it a stats-based sort of video. That's not how I want to do it. And then we've got just a few comparisons, right? Just very quickly. We're not going to go through all of it, but I want to compare them to CDMs, and then we're going to look at central midfielders. If you look at CDMs, you're talking about defensively, right? Interceptions and tackles from Ndidi are miles ahead. Like he does a lot of defensive work. We know this about Ndidi. He's very, very good at winning the ball back. Basuma's not a CDM, but I put him in here because obviously a lot of United fans want him. For me, he's not a CDM. He's an 8. He's a fantastic dribbler, Basuma. He's not the best at passing, but he's a fantastic dribbler. So for me, he's not a CDM simply because his ability to distribute the ball from that area, if you start playing him alongside Fred or McTominay in the central areas, you'll see the problem with the creativity anyway. But his passing stats aren't great. His interceptions and tackles are decent, and successful dribbles are pretty good. I think he's someone who would actually replace Fred if we were to buy Basuma. I don't think he's someone who would be a central defensive midfielder. I think he'd have to play alongside it. So he's a different kind of midfielder. I don't think he's actually a DM, but a lot of people want us to buy him as a DM. He might develop into one, but at the moment, I don't think he's a DM at the moment. And then there's obviously Declan Rice as well. So,
do you know the funny thing is?
Do
you know the funny thing is? You know the way we try and play outside from the back, like from Hendo, De Gea to Harry Maguire, try and play, the Pep play or whatever. Basuma's actually not bad on the ball. He's not tidy. He doesn't really give away possession too much from what I've saw. I think it just shows where Man United are right now that we're considering Basuma, and I don't think that's just because of where we are as in standards. I think it's because also we know financially we're not gonna go buy. I remember the days when we forked out money to buy Varane. Back in the day.
He's a good player, to be fair to him.
Basuma's a very good player. I just think for me, it's just that he's a good option. However, I don't think he's. I don't know. I think is he slightly better than Fred? I don't know. Is he more physical? Yes. Has he got presence? Yes. I probably just edges it, Rachel, because he's probably better on the ball. They could play together.
There is another thing as well, Bobs. There's another thing. Basuma is 24 years old. Fred is 28. Fred is supposed to be in his prime now. This is the best of sort of Fred, if you know what I mean. He's not going to improve at all, really. So selling Fred and bringing in Basuma is an upgrade in the sense that Basuma still has a bit of leeway in terms of improvement. Basuma is much better on the ball in terms of dribbling. He's a much better dribbler than Fred. I think the only person he probably isn't better dribbling than in our team is probably Martial and Pogba, maybe Rashford to an extent. I think we don't have a lot of great dribblers in our team. But no, we really don't.
We don't have enough players that are good at keeping possession. So it's a very unbalanced squad we have. Sorry, carry on.
I look at Man United and I look in the midfield, and people know I have a lot of criticism when it comes to like Pogba, and you have a lot of Man United fans and probably even rivals that criticize the likes of Bruno or Martial or Rashford. But when you consider the central of the park, you have to play McTominay and Fred because you don't have a DM, and that limits you guys massively. I think people need to cut. I think some United fans need to be realistic because they complain about in terms of not winning the league, or for example, what the last result, losing 4-2 to Liverpool. But even as bad as Liverpool have been this season, their midfield is still better than yours, and people know if you win the midfield battle, you're more than likely able to win
Yeah,
the game. I
but
didn't
then
watch the full game, but just from the highlights I saw a lot of mistakes from Fred that ended up leading to the goals. And it's just like if you want to progress and you want to get into a title challenge, buy Sancho, you can buy Kane, or you can buy Varane. If you don't fix that midfield, you're not going to sustain a challenge.
I agree, 100%.
Forgetting
to
Ollie's
add
not
to
good
that,
enough.
to add to that, right? Okay, you look at, we talk about teams. Oh, you have to play DM and stuff. If you're playing a free midfield and they are that good enough, you don't have to play hold the ball because it just takes intelligence to
I
say
disagree.
if. Well, see, between right. So I'm going off experience, right? I've played in a flat three, and it's like if you're above the ball, if two of your colleagues are ahead of you, you stay back. It doesn't make sense for everyone to go and gun ho, and that's what we're lacking sometimes. And I think yes, you can have someone that's like right, Ndidi. You know, Ndidi's not going to go forward. You know what he's going to do. But if you're smart with it, why can't they rotate? We saw Cruz, Modric, and Casemiro. Okay, Casemiro was the deepest, but they still rotated. So it also takes intelligence as well.
We lack that in
And
our
we
team
don't
as
have
well.
that. We lack that as well.
Yeah, we definitely do. Definitely do. Going to compare a little bit with central midfielders because we've spoken about in sort of like the Man United breakdown. Usually, when you play a double pivot, you have a sort of specialized defensive midfielder, and then you have a specialized sort of deep lying sort of creator. And so, obviously, if you talk about McTominay and Fred, McTominay tends to be the one that sits a lot more than Fred. Fred's the one that sort of goes box to box. So, I'm going to have a look at some central midfielders. I'm going to put Pogba in here, even though he's our player, because I want people to see the difference in terms of what Paul Pogba does compared to the other two, even when he's playing in a deeper role, because there are actually some really interesting stats here. So there's Paul Pogba, Kovacic, and Tielemans. I rate Tielemans very highly. I'm not a biggest fan of Kovacic, but I know a lot of people rate him, so I put him in here.
I rate him, yeah.
Obviously, the pass success, as we know, like midfielders, they tend to have quite a higher pass success rate in general, central midfielders, because they do pay side to side. They try to recycle the ball. They play in and out. That's how they sort of work. There is a lot of sideways passing in the midfield anyway. Accurate long balls, Kovacic actually wins, even though that would be quite surprising to some because in general, he's not really a long passer, I would say. Obviously, accurate passes in your own half are always going to be higher than the opposition half, simply because in your own half, your pass, as I said, you're passing it out, a lot of sideways passing. Obviously, in the opposition half, you're playing more progressive passes in general. But where Kovacic lacks for me is his actual creativity and product. And you can actually tell this by possession loss per 90. Usually, creative players lose the ball more often than non-creative players. It's a fact. If you look at KDB, for example, I was looking at it earlier. KDB loses the ball 18 times per 90 on average. Bruno 17. They're high numbers usually because they're trying to create, and every time you create, you're not always going to get that final ball quite right. So they will give the ball away quite a bit. But what really surprised me was the interceptions per 90 and tackles per 90 from Paul Pogba. So Paul Pogba gets a lot of stick for his defensive contributions. We've seen quite a few mistakes from him. He's given away penalties. He's not tracking his man and set pieces, etc.
Which is only just recently, to be fair to him.
Or giving away the ball in general in the middle of the pitch and then sort of, fouling in our box and causing penalties, and that's something that's happened quite a bit this season. But the giving away the ball thing has sort of happened since he got here, really. But his interceptions per 90 are 2.4. That's higher than both McTominay. I think that's higher than McTominay and higher than Fred, or around the same as Fred. And his tackles per 90 are actually higher than McTominay's. So his defensive contributions in that respect are actually higher than McTominay's, who's our holding sort of midfielder, which is pretty bad in terms of McTominay. Obviously, Pogba and Kovacic are both dribblers. Kovacic is a very good dribbler, to be fair to him. Very, very good dribbler. Tielemans not so much, but he's decent enough. So even in terms of stats, McTominay and Fred are pretty much inferior to the others in both central midfield and central defensive midfield. So they both lack massively. So, yeah, statistically, I don't know what the hype is with a lot of our players. I think statistically, obviously, people tend to overrate and tend to pick out the stats that they want. That's why I wanted to compare everyone with the same stats, not just cherry picking them sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you can see from that there's a massive difference between them. So we're going to have a look at the players individually, and we're going to start with McTominay. So we spoke about his shooting. He scored 7 goals in all competitions this season. Great shooting technique, to be fair. Hits the ball really well. We know that about him. We know that he's aggressive and tenacious. He tends to cover the wide areas when our inside forwards don't track back. He does it all the time. He's gotten a lot better at sort of reading the game in that respect. Does it here against Chelsea. So you can see there's Chilwell here, the fullback, and Marcus Rashford, inside forward here. He's so far behind the play, Marcus Rashford. McTominay spotted that, and he's covering the half space, making sure that AWB isn't 1v2. So he does that quite a lot, McTominay. He does it like all the time. He always covers for Rashford because Rashford's really poor at tracking back at times. It's really annoying. He does it here against Leeds a couple of weeks ago. Same sort of thing. Covers. Very good in that respect. He does work hard, McTominay. Sometimes his reading of the game isn't great, but when it comes to sort of covering in half spaces, he's very good at that, and it does help us defensively. But this is where McTominay sometimes is just he's very frustrating. All of us, I think our centre backs do it as well, and our holding players. Have you ever noticed that when players run towards us with the ball, our players back off? A lot of defenders and central midfielders do this. Jorginho did it against Tielemans. We spoke about it with Gabriel the other day as well. They tend to back off. They don't confront players. And this was against Leicester. Engaged. Yeah, this was against Leicester. Bruno Fernandes gives the ball away. Bruno things. Ball's played inside to Harvey Barnes. And McTominay just lets him get it onto his left foot. And Harvey Barnes shoots and he scores. This was really poor from McTominay. He's actually just standing still, sort of like on his heels. He's not reacting to the situation. And like you can see the space that Harvey Barnes, this is in the center of the pitch, remember? And there's space here. You can't just let a left-footed player go into that space for free. It's really poor from him. And yeah, he ends up scoring from it. So it was really bad. So sometimes he needs to work a little bit on his awareness and sort of how he reacts to things. Normally, like if that's in Ndidi, he's closed down instantly, Harvey Barnes. But McTominay doesn't quite do it.
And do you know what it is? Like, you need to be able to anticipate danger. It's not, I don't want to say it's easy. However, how is the team going to hurt you? Where's the ball going to go? You have to like picture things to say like if he gets in here, he gets a shot on the target. Do you know what I mean? Is he a good shooter? When they say if James Rodriguez cuts in on his left, you're going to go block him because from 25, 30 yards he can hit the target, right? It could be a goal. So like you've got to engage, and it's sometimes anticipating. It's just like putting a block in, or nicking the ball, or just being in the right position to put someone off and make them make a decision, make the opposition make a decision. That's what he needs to work on.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, positionally he has improved, but he's still not there, and I don't think he's going to become like an elite defensive midfielder or anything like that. There's no way. So yeah, we definitely need cover in that sort of position. We're going to talk about McTominay on the ball now. For me, McTominay on the ball really lacks, like massively. He makes very poor decisions on the ball. He goes for stupid passes. He does very strange things. And this was against Leeds. This is one of the things I actually nearly turned off my TV when I watched this. So Leeds give the ball away. You can see how much space McTominay's received the ball in. It's so much space. And he runs in the direction of these two players here. So automatically that's a big red flag. You can see how much space is right in front of him. He runs towards that sort of area, and then he dribbles straight into them. There are so many options when he receives the ball, but he decides to hold on to it, dribble right into him, and then just lose the ball. Like they've just conceded possession in their own half, and basically he's just lost the ball for no reason. He does it all the time, McTominay. Or his decision making on the ball is really poor. And there's going to be another example of it next, which is going to be this one here. So you can see he's on the ball here, and then you've got Mason Greenwood making a really nice run into the half space here. He's way onside, obviously, massive amount of space. McTominay's got the ball. We're just thinking slide him in, right? And Greenwood can get the ball with his left foot and probably go far corner.
But
what he decides to do is dribble to the edge of the box and play it to Martial, who has 3 players around him. Greenwood is now offside, and Martial loses the ball. Right, so there's stats that people look at with how many touches our players have inside the box, right? Martial probably takes 2 or 3 touches in the box at this point, with his back to goal, with 3 players surrounding him and no space to sort of maneuver. If he tries to play it to Greenwood, Greenwood's just offside now because he's already made the run for the McTominay pass that never came. So Martial just loses the ball here. On average, Martial, I believe, well, I think even our strikers in general have about 4-5 touches in the box per game. And 2 or 3 of them have been wasted in this move. And nothing's come with it.
But then, you know how we were talking about anticipation and seeing stuff? He's surely got to anticipate what is the best pass now, you know. And do you pass it to Martial, so it's sewn up his arse, or do you pass it into space where Greenwood could run on, take a shot, or penetrate their defence?
Yeah. I mean, look at that space. You just know Greenwood picks up the ball in this area and he can do something. And there's so many options. Greenwood doesn't even have to shoot. Like, if Martial's, and I think that's Rashford there, running into the box, you can play it across the face of goal. So there's so many options that can happen there. And the fact that nothing happened is astonishing. And it happens all the time. Whenever there's a low block situation, especially, and you get these sort of moments where you have a bit of space, you have to exploit it. And when you don't exploit it and you just lose the ball, it's a chance that you just don't create. So it's a ridiculous thing to happen. Yeah, this is a really poor bit of play from McTominay.
It's also quite worrying in the sense where it kind of makes you want to think, what kind of midfielder are you? You know, because even possession, you know, at least when you look at Kovacic, for example, we had Kovacic there. Kovacic can run with the ball, he can tackle, he can sit deep, he can create. Okay, you could say, I dare say, he could be an all-round midfielder. I really like him, especially when he's good in possession. Then you look at McTominay and you're thinking, well, what are you? What is your best attribute?
Shooting, maybe. Like, in terms of attacking play, it's shooting, isn't it? It's not passing. It's not dribbling. He's got a good shot on him. That's all you can really say. That he's got a good shot on him. That's absolutely not. Absolutely not. There is no doubting. It's not good enough from him. This image here is kind of so you see Mata here. Mata's, you know, he plays sort of on the right inside forward position, right? So he makes a run across in between the lines. McTominay doesn't spot this run, even though it's happening right in front of his eyes. And Mata, has managed to make the run towards the left side with no ball in towards him. So instead, McTominay plays the ball to Rashford. It actually doesn't even go to Rashford. It actually goes to the opposition player in this situation. This is really bad because not only has he missed a good pass where Mata can get onto his left foot and face the goal, but he's also misplaced the pass to Rashford because he hasn't played it through the gap. Because there's 3 players here, you can see. If he plays it through the gap, there's 3 players that can pick up the ball. He's actually played it straight to the opposition player. So just bad pass in general. Like, it was just poorly executed. A simple pass, and he doesn't even make it. So McTominay's passing, really, really bad. And then there's this situation here. Same game, Bruno Fernandes is in a situation where he can get the ball and turn into space, right? McTominay chooses to pass back towards Aaron Wan-Bissaka. He doesn't play it forward so Aaron Wan-Bissaka can run onto it. He plays it backwards. Yeah. So it stops the momentum of our attack, and opposition teams can get back into their shape. It's bad, like really, really bad from McTominay, because you just lose all momentum. You can't be doing that. When people talk about how slow we are in possession, it's things like this that cause it. He can't be passing back here. Play it across into the space here. Do not play it straight to AWB's feet while he's trying to run into space. Don't do it like that. Play it into the space so that we can be on the front foot.
Step onto it. Yes, it's like when you play football in midfield, right? Like I played centre mid, so hold it up. I would if you play the ball, you play it forward so they can step onto it, so they can gain a forward positive position. You know, he steps onto it, so his motion is going forward, and then he can look up.
Yep.
And then you are in a position where you act as an option. But when you play it that way, it gives, obviously, I believe that's Newcastle, the players to shuttle along and you know, close the position there. That's what I'm saying, is that creativity. And you know the funny thing is, if he was playing FIFA, he probably plays that pass. You know that? No, but it's true though. He plays the pass properly though. You press triangle or through ball, so he steps onto it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, it's trust me, Bob's. It's frustrating. I hear it. Trust me. Yeah, we're gonna move on to Fred.
Rachel, hold on. What do you think of? If anything, I think Fred is holding Scott back, which is weird because I've heard the opposite, that McTominay holds back Fred. So do you think one of them limits the other?
Well, I think people need to remember is that they're both 8s. They're not 6s. Then neither of them are defensive midfielders. So ironically, they both sort of hold each other back in the sense that one of them has to not play in their position. And usually, funnily enough, it's McTominay who has to sit. As I said before, Fred can't hold a midfield. He's the one that presses higher up the pitch. He wins the ball back very high. And he's better at that than McTominay anyway. So McTominay will be the one that sits, and he can't actually push forward and shoot or try and influence the final third in his own little way. So I guess they both limit each other because they're not supposed to be playing together in a midfield like that anyway.
As much as I don't like Fred, and I don't want to be biased to Scott McTominay with like the Scottish and stuff, Fred's a better footballer than him. He is. You know?
Yeah, he is. I agree.
If Fred gets played in his actual position, you can say the same with Scott. You know, Fred's probably a better footballer. It's just unfortunate that when he's making the passes, he's 20 yards, 20, 30 yards out of position. You know? So maybe his range of passing, but hey, best out of bad bunch. But yeah, that's the rest of it. He's not world class anyway. Whoever says he's world class.
No. He's definitely not world class, believe me. We've seen enough midfielders that are world class to know that he's not.
100%.
Okay, so
world class.
So
listen, you guys you're not watching him properly. That's it.
No,
that's the point where I'm watching him. He's not playing football properly. You know, no, he has to. You know, I'm not going to slander him, but like he does have some good games. But why does he have some good games? Because we compliment his closing down. We compliment the energy he has. That's not what I want to be talking about, Fred. I want you to be bullying teams. You know, imprinting your personality on them. You know.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's not doing that. So
yeah.
Sorry.
That's all right. No. Oh, in response to our biz, we are going to do a small little segment on Donny and why he's not played, just so people can understand him a little bit better. Because there is a bit of a thing in our fan base where people are like, why doesn't Donny play in the double pivot? And we're going to touch on it a little bit. So, yeah.
Is Xhaka... I don't think you have Xhaka as part of the other midfielders you're comparing, but is Xhaka clear?
He's a better passer than Fred and McTominay, yeah, sure. He's a better passer, I agree.
Would you take him at Man United?
No, I wouldn't want any of them anywhere near us.
Who's this?
Xhaka.
No.
Well, he's an upgrade.
He's not an upgrade.
But do you know what it is, Prime, right? If you're gonna buy a player to play in the midfield, you want a significant upgrade. You don't want a slight upgrade or whatever. Like Xhaka is, for me, is trash. It's the same with like Fred and McTominay. They're just not. None of them are good enough. None of them.
But
if you want to compete at the highest level, then you can't have either of them, any of them at your club.
Exactly. And you have to ask yourself this, yeah. When we go for a player, the way I see it is this, yeah, is Man City, Barcelona, Real Madrid, the elite clubs going for this player. If not, why are we then?
Yeah.
That's just the way I see it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, don't get me wrong. There are some gems in even in lower league. Like, for example, Andy Robertson was at Hull, wasn't he? If I remember correctly. But there are some gems in lower league.
He started from in Scotland, Queen's Park. Then he went to Dundee United. Then he went to Hull. Yeah, but no, I hear what you're saying, Rich.
There are some gems.
There are gems. There are. However, it's just do you know what it is for me though? Is that we're not smart enough.
Yeah,
to do stuff like that, you know.
Oh yeah, exactly.
I don't think it's that. It's that, but also as fans of big clubs or the big six, we're quite snobbish. So if I know people rate Lamptey and stuff, but if United bought what's his name, Lewis Dunk, for example, you guys would, your fan base, maybe not you two specifically, but your fan base would turn your heads at it. Or if Chelsea bought what's his name, Antonio from West Ham, people would laugh and turn their heads at it, even though they could actually be smart signings. But because they're from the lower half of the table, people are going to laugh.
That's fair enough. Right, we're going to speak about Fred now. Like I said before, we know he's tenacious. You actually find Fred is on the ground a lot. He's always sliding in, making tackles and whatnot. Sometimes it works well and he just, he wins the ball back. And sometimes this sort of thing happens. This was against Liverpool. Now, in the first 15 minutes of this game, I remember tweeting Fred started well. And as soon as I sort of tweeted that, I said to myself, I'm gonna be bitten in the arse here with this, because we all know what Fred gets, how he gets sometimes. And he started to do it about 25, 30 minutes in, where he started to just slide everywhere. Honestly, he was just on the floor so often. It was really, really annoying. And he wasn't even winning the ball properly. So in this situation, Thiago just gets the ball back. Fred goes in. You can see he's in his little sliding animation here. And Thiago gets the ball past him. Ball's played towards the left side. And it leads to the Diogo Jota shot, where he sort of flicks up and volleys it. And obviously Henderson flicks it over for a corner. A corner, which obviously led to the goal. Obviously, the goal was not Fred's fault in the sense that he didn't actually have a major part in it, if I remember correctly. But it's little things like this where Fred will just make awful decisions in the middle of the pitch. Just stay on your feet here. You've got Paul Pogba and Bruno surrounding Thiago. You don't need to go to ground. Don't give him extra bit of space. Yeah, don't give him the extra bit of space to get past. Because we know Thiago is a very good player on the ball. So you can't just give him just free space, basically. That's what's basically happening here. He's giving him space for free. For absolutely no reason. Going to go on to Fred's passing. Now, Fred is a much better passer than McTominay. And his vision's better than McTominay's in the sense that he will make a forward pass like this that will try and break the lines. He's actually a lot better than it. His vertical passing is way ahead of McTominay's. Problem with Fred is that his passing relies on how much space he's given. So against teams where you can counter, you find that Fred is actually quite effective because there's a lot of space for him to pass into. But against low blocks, as I said before, his passing lacks massively. So here you can see there's quite a bit. This is actually a decent pass, to be fair, from Fred. This is against Leeds. And then there's obviously this pass here against West Ham. You can see it's a line-breaking pass because it's between the centre-backs and the central midfielders here. But there's a lot of space. There's a massive gap between them. It's not like it's in a tight area. We're actually countering here. It's a good pass from Fred. And Bruno drives towards the opposition box. And then Greenwood gets a shot off. So it's a good bit of play here. And then obviously this is a diagonal pass to Mata. You can see Fred doesn't usually go for these passes, but the space, you can see how much space is in here. That obviously he can make it, and it doesn't matter if it's slightly off target because it's space.
What's your she in that? Does a better midfielder make the better pass? Yes or no?
What, in this situation? Well, there's a lot of space for him to sort of pass into. So it doesn't really matter if there's a better midfielder that makes this pass. The pass was made anyway, wasn't it? So, yeah, this isn't sort of an issue, to be honest with you. The issue is, like I said, when you're playing against a low block, Fred doesn't make sort of incisive passes because he just usually fails at them. And it was the same at Shakhtar. When Man City plays Shakhtar, for example, I'm sure that's the only time they actually saw him play in the Champions League. Man City do leave a lot of space. We know this about Manchester City. Do you know what I mean? They've always left a lot of space, especially when they're playing against teams they know they can sort of dominate. They'll sort of commit players forward and they'll leave gaps. So
especially City when City played Shakhtar, was that Pep's team?
Yeah, it would have been. I believe so, because I think that was when they were being linked with Fred after that, weren't they? Before we got him.
Oh, okay. So
Pep's
first. So that might have been Pep's, because Fred was bought in Mourinho's last season, and him and Pep came together, didn't they? So this might have been during City Centurion season, I think,
Yeah.
possibly.
Yeah.
But
But the
even
thing
then,
about that, though,
with Fred, or not Fred, with Man City. Oh, this is the first season I've seen City really defensively secure. They've always been able to be caught on the counter attack. So I think those two games are quite, you know.
Yeah,
the thing
absolutely.
about that, yeah, I hear what you guys are saying, and the thing about that is that we need. Sorry, my son's humming in the background here. The
No,
thing
no
I think
worries.
he's enjoying what he's watching on his tablet. The thing about that, right? What you can hear him.
Yeah, you can.
He's oh God, I forgot what I was going to say now. God, Brian, what did you say? I've just lost my train of thought now. My goodness.
No. I was just saying that that game that United fans who love Fred seem to cast up, it was against a City team back then anyway that weren't that good defensively, and you could always get at them on the counter attack. Like this is the
Yeah. So
first
sorry.
time this
So I remember what I was
season.
going to say now.
Yeah,
Yeah. We I don't know if it's just my United. No, it's not United fans. It's actually football fans now are bigging players up now for the basic stuff.
Hmm.
Like he's doing something that he should be doing. Do you get what I'm
Yeah,
trying to say? Like
I agree.
that's your job. Why are you not doing it anyway? Do you know what I'm trying to say? Oh, he's been good on the ball. Yeah, well, we bought you for 53 million. Surely that's the basic. You should be good. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Do you guys get
Yeah,
what I'm
no,
trying to
I
say
agree.
here?
I agree.
And
I agree.
excuse me, I feel like we overhype players a lot. Where it's
Hmm.
like, yeah, he done well today, but I'm thinking, is that where we're at now? Where we're just saying to people, yeah, he done a good job. He played well today. What? Because he played a good few passes forward. That's what you're supposed to
exactly.
do. Like that should be minimum. You know?
Yeah, I agree.
But Bob's is
Absolutely.
right. I mean, back then, when I'd hear things like, "Oh, he had a good game" or "He put in a shift," that's for players like Darren Fletcher. You know, he
Yeah.
was a squad player for
And
Man
Dan
United.
Fletcher would score as well. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm.
So what are we talking about here?
No,
Sorry, carry on,
absolutely.
Brian.
I agree. Um, yeah. All right. So this here, spread against the low block. You can see the defensive line. You can see there's 4 defenders, 5 midfielders, and obviously a forward player here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can see how much the team is shifted towards the right side of the pitch, right? Now you can see on the left side there's a lot of space. I believe that's Marcus Rashford, I think. Anyway, so Fred gets the ball. Remember, he's left-footed, by the way. He picks up the ball. He's back to goal. There is a pass straight into here to switch the play and basically take out the right side of the pitch. Okay, and look at the space that they'd be in. If the ball's played into this area, this player can just run towards the goal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
instead, he plays it backwards, and the team gets to set and they get to shift back towards the center again and keep their sort of positions compact. Again, this is the sort of thing that I'm talking about. Any decent midfielder, left-footed midfielder, picks up the ball here, peripheral vision, you see that pass. You
Sense,
absolutely see
isn't
that
it?
pass.
And that is Fred, right? So his left foot makes it. He's left-footed, so it makes it easier for him to play that ball across anyway.
Hmm.
You know what I'm trying to say? Because if it's a right footer that doesn't trust his left foot, he
Yeah,
comes back and then he plays it. You know.
yeah, absolutely. I agree. It's a consistent issue when we play against low blocks. To be honest with you, like Dominic and Fred will get to these areas and they'll either be in the wrong position in the first place to actually receive the ball, or they'll receive it and pass it backwards. It's a massive problem, especially against low blocks. You need to be quicker on the ball so that you can
Mm-hmm.
sort of exploit spaces. If you start playing the ball backwards and start being too slow, they get to set into their position. So this sort of thing here is what bugs me the most when we play against low blocks, because we struggle to break teams down because of things like this. All right, this is the goal that we conceded against Leicester in the FA Cup. Now, this a lot of people blamed Harry Maguire for this. I want to make it very, very clear it is not Harry Maguire's fault. Very, very clear. Because when you play out from the back, your central midfielder shows for the ball. So in this situation here, you can see where Fred is, and Yuri Tielemans is like on his back here. Playing out from the back, our fullbacks are very, very deep because of this. And you can see sort of the shape that Leicester are sort of pressing, and they're pressing very, very narrow because they know McTominay, Fred, even Matic in this situation, who he played alongside, are not good enough on the ball. They're very slow. The first touch isn't quite there. So Fred shows for the ball in this situation, and Maguire passes to him. Now, you can see there's a lot of space on this side, right?
Mm-hmm.
All Fred has to do is play it there. It doesn't have to be the perfect pass. Just play it into the space. There's no one around him here. So you can play it into the space, and we can set off in the attack, and we've broken a press because you've taken out 5 Leicester players.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Yep.
Instead, what's happened is he's taken a really poor first touch. So
Sure.
Tielemans has now closed the passing line. He's played it back to Henderson, which is a poor pass. So bad touch, bad pass. And Iheanacho intercepts and scores.
Mm-hmm.
I want to make this very, very clear. This is not Harry Maguire's fault. This is how you play out from the back. This is on Fred, 100%. It's a first-time pass that he can make, and he refuses to do it. He takes a touch, which we know he's got a poor touch, and it takes him into a position where he's actually in a bit of trouble. And even then, he could have played the ball back to Henderson just fine. The pass wasn't good enough, and this is what happens, basically. We can see the goal.
Even so, right, go back one slide, go back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, see as Harry's hit that ball, okay?
Yeah.
Harry
Yeah.
could pass an instruction on and
Mhm.
like hook it first time, and that means right foot out towards to Wan-Bissaka. Or he could say punch it back to Hendo. So punch it back means you just jab it back, as in put pace on it, put a bit of power on it, so it reaches your colleague. He also could say right shoulder turn. So that means as he's getting it on his left foot, because Tielemans is coming from his left shoulder,
Mm-hmm.
he turns on his right, and then he opens up the pitch. You know, so if you do it to the next slide,
Mm-hmm.
please. So instead of giving it back and he turns on his right hand, he turns to the right. There's a bigger picture for him. You know.
Yeah.
And we've actually beat the press.
Yeah.
So
But this is
I
the
only say
thing,
it's
Bob.
not Harry's fault. Harry's fault. However, I
Mm.
just think if he gave that ball with some instruction, but at the same time, Fred should be good enough to be able to play a 10-yard pass at the end of the day.
But the thing is, if you look at the first image, you can see where Fred is, right? He knows AWB's there. He knows. Do you see what I mean? He knows. You look around, right? So usually when you're about to receive the ball, you look around quickly just to see what's around you, right? He can see. So he knows Tielemans on his back. You can see Vardy. You can see Iheanacho. You can see Perez, and you can see Albrighton. That's 4 players in front of you, and you know there's a player behind you. That's 5 players. And you're saying to yourself, okay, they're pressing quite high. AWB's in space. If I can receive the ball, I can pass it. When you show for the ball as a midfielder, you should have a picture in your head of what you're going to do with it.
Yes.
Otherwise, he wouldn't have shown for it in the first place, and we could have just hoofed it up. The fact that he showed for the ball tells me that he knows what he wants to do with it.
100%.
So,
Rachel, because if that's United trying to play out the back, how often does that happen? So does Fred usually drop that deep to show for the ball?
he does sometimes. The thing is, right? Usually we don't play when we build up. It's when we have McTominay and Fred. McTominay recently has actually formed a false back 3, and Fred plays in the single pivot. He's nowhere near as effective as Paul Pogba. We actually did it against Aston Villa, and we attempted it against Liverpool, but it didn't work. We know McTominay and Fred aren't good passers, and we know that, as Bob said, Fred is not the type to actually turn into space with the ball. Remember, Prime, we spoke about it earlier. He's not that sort of player.
Yeah.
So we end up in a situation where we try to use our fullbacks more when we build up from the back. So our fullbacks are way too deep. Always, whenever McTominay, Fred, Matic, McTominay, the fullbacks are really deep, so it gives you options. And we usually try to play in wider areas. We don't actually play centrally often, because when we do, like for example, against Spurs in the first half, we can't do it because teams know how to press against us now. I'll show you in a second. Like it's actually quite ridiculous how teams are setting up against us because of the limitations of those 2 players. We just can't play through the center with them often. Like we can't do it consistently.
It's because we're not good enough.
No, I agree.
Mm.
This is Xhaka. This is the Xhaka situation, right?
Mm.
A lot of people blame Bern Leno for this, right? This is not Leno's fault either. Look at the space. Look at the pass that Xhaka can make here. Leno has already played the ball, right? Xhaka is in so much space, and Luis is in a lot of space as well. This is a simple pass straight to him. Okay. Xhaka, again, exactly the same as Fred, takes a bad touch and puts him into an area where he's able to be closed down and the passing line is closed. So he tries to flick it over Chris Wood, who's actually a beast of a man, and it goes straight into the goal. Right? This is a central midfielder issue. This is not an issue with goalkeeping. It's not an issue with playing out from the back in general. This is simple. Do you know what I mean? This isn't even a great press from Burnley, by the way. This is just look at them. Do not tell me this is a goalkeeper's fault or the passer's fault. This is on the midfielder that showed for the ball and just didn't utilize it properly. So this idea that when you play out from the back, that it's usually the person who's passed its fault. It's not. It's usually the receiver, because they're showing for the ball. That means that they should know what they're going to do with it. Otherwise, you just wouldn't show for it, and then it could be hoofed out. Do you see what I mean? So just don't show for it. If you're not good enough, don't show for it, and then you don't have to play out from the back.
Or you just don't give them the ball.
Just don't show for it. Don't show for it.
Like, what's wrong with sometimes just kicking the ball at the bar? Like,
yeah,
you know, it's not by force that you have to play that ball. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. It's ridiculous. All right, McFred double pivot, guys. We got there. Okay. So when these two play together, they usually play quite close together. There's not a big gap between them, especially against big teams, which is where they're most effective. You can see the blades of grass. There's five blades of grass. So when we play against big teams and how they set up, we're very, very compact. This is why we don't lose against big teams in general. We're very compact. They work hard for the ball. When they win the ball high up the pitch, there's usually a lot of people there that they can sort of pass it on to. They're not relied upon to create. They're all about winning the ball back. So they're very good at that. Against Chelsea, Fred did a really good man marking job on Kai Havertz, actually, and stopped Kai Havertz from playing the game, essentially. So he did a good job there. We know what Fred's like, as we said, tenacious, aggressive, doesn't allow players to sort of have long on the ball. So it's down to the player who's playing against Fred to just be a little bit more cute with the ball, try and flick it around them, because Fred, as we know, is very, very aggressive, and he will just fly in sometimes. So it's just down to the player just to adapt to that, just adapt to the way Fred plays. And against Manchester City, same sort of thing, very, very narrow. We were pressing, we forced them to play in wide areas, and McFred, in fact, the whole team shifts to one side. Whenever we force a team to play wide, we will shift to that side, and they'll be very, very close together, and they'll usually stop like Gundogan, KDB, etc. from getting onto the ball. Manchester City don't like to play wide. They like to play in the middle with their ballers, basically. So forcing them wide is why we look very good against Man City. We always do this. We know how Pep plays. He's not someone who has a lot of wing play. He tends to play through the middle and then distribute it out wide in the final third. So from our point of view, we seem to have City's number in that respect, because Pep just doesn't change the way he plays, and we know how to play against it now. So it's pretty simple. And as we said, McFred, they can pass better when it's into space, and we know City leave a lot of space. And yeah, you can see it here. We're just shifting it over to Zinchenko, and Fred is shifting over to that side, and McTominay is already there onto Gundogan, making sure that he can't get the ball. So you can see the shape again. It's compact. It's 5 blades of grass again. Bruno's pressing. You can see they can't get the ball into central areas without being taken down. Very narrow press from us, and that's how we sort of beat Manchester City, basically. And this one here is against Aston Villa. We did something very different to what we usually do. As I said before, in this game, McTominay goes into sort of a false back 3, and Fred, basically in this game, a lot of the ball was played through Fred. So a positive here, because usually we don't do this, but usually when you have someone in a single pivot, it means that you have more passing options, and you can just see it here. When Fred can pick up the ball, he can play it off to multiple players at once, and the ball was played a lot quicker. So it was pretty good in this game. But the problem with Fred, as I said before, against better opposition, he does struggle. So that for me tells me he could never be an elite midfielder. If he can't do that regularly, consistently, over 90 minutes, over a season, he's nowhere near good enough. Right. Deficiencies. This stat made me laugh, right? So Harry Maguire makes more progressive carries per 90 without Pogba in the central midfield role than what he does when Pogba is in the central midfield role. And what this basically means is when you have like McFred or Matic and Fred or Matic and McTominay, what ends up happening is Harry Maguire starts to become a creator. He steps into midfield often. We've seen it many times where he starts to dribble towards the opposition goal. You don't want that from your centre back. Like, distributing the ball is absolutely fine. If it's a space to run into every now and then, you can do it. But the fact that Harry Maguire consistently gets involved in the attack more often because McFred are in there tells me that the midfielders are not progressing the ball well enough. So it's actually horrendous when you think about it. Honestly, this shouldn't be happening. You can't bypass your midfielders, your two central midfielders, when you're trying to progress the ball out because they're not good enough on the ball. Not one of them.
Not one of them at all.
Yeah.
It's obviously it comes down to trust, though, doesn't it? You know, there's obviously no trust there.
No, absolutely.
He doesn't think, well, there's point me passing you the ball because we're just going to lose it. So I'd rather force something to then go make sure that the pass does go through, doesn't it? I mean, that's what he's doing.
Yeah, exactly. So there's one team that absolutely knows how to play against us, and that's Leicester. Leicester are very good when they play against us. They know exactly how to press us. They know how to cause us issues. And what they essentially do is they box in Fred and McTominay. Every single time they do a very narrow press, and this causes massive issues for us. So in this situation here, we haven't got a false back three. We haven't got a false back three. We're playing a back four, and then we have McTominay and Fred in the pivot. Fred and McTominay have this problem with movement. They don't move into good areas when they play.
Nope.
And what you end up getting is a situation where they're very, very narrow, very close together, and we end up passing very slowly out from the back. When that happens, this is where we get the slow, boring passing that everyone complains about. Always happens. It always happens against Leicester. We end up with really poor performances against Leicester, and unfortunately, Ollie hasn't quite worked out how to sort of deal with it at times. It's really, really frustrating to actually watch. But yeah, Brendan Rodgers sort of has Ollie's number in that respect. Tactically, he stopped us from playing through the middle.
Which is not, it's not hard to realise though, is it? You know, which is quite worrying, to be honest. Very easy to
most teams do this.
Yeah.
But the thing with Leicester is that they have some very, very good players, especially in the middle. Their central players are very, very good. Their spine of their team is very good. They're like Tielemans and Ndidi, in my opinion, are the second best central midfield partnership in the league. I think they are that good, personally.
Fofana and Tielemans is probably, like, especially that game. Tielemans is not world class, right? But he's so influential. Okay, he like penetrates the ball. He rarely makes a bad decision. And Fofana is just a great defender. Just he's mobile. He anticipates everything. Even when he was booked, he was still making interceptions, still closing down. You know, and these are young players, and it's frustrating to see them play well for Leicester. Do you know?
Do you know what the thing is though? With Leicester is that if we want to buy any of the Leicester players, they're going to cost so much money. It's just not worth it in that respect.
We could have bought Tielemans for 40 million, but we took too long and decided to send for Leicester. How did that happen?
Yeah, it's great. A lot of Premier League teams. I know we were linked with Tielemans, to be fair, but like a lot of teams were linked with Tielemans. He was a very sought after player, to be fair. So. Yep, this again. Look at them. They boxed in McTominay and Fred, playing out from the back. This situation is really bad, right? Because you can see how deep our fullbacks are. And then you've got McTominay and Fred standing still in the centre of the pitch. What they should be doing, is moving into the half space so that the fullbacks can push further up the pitch.
so they can
But
take it on the half turn, right?
yeah, absolutely. McTominay is marking Jamie Vardy even though we have possession. I mean, what is that
hides a
about?
lot. He hides a lot.
He absolutely does.
He does a
He
lot of
does.
hiding. People get at me saying no, he doesn't. Like, he does. He does hide. You know,
Yeah, he does.
He's asking for the ball, but how are you supposed to play through a player? You know?
Yeah,
Like, come on, man.
yeah, he does. It's ridiculous. And then this is what happened against Tottenham. Even though we won, but in the first half, Tottenham were much better in terms of their press. So, like, you look at McTominay and Fred here, Ndombele and Lo Celso did a man marking job. They were actually doing a man marking job on each other. So both sort of players were, so McTominay and Fred were doing it on them, and they were doing it on McFred. But they were just better at it. The only person that sort of ruined their press was actually Harry Kane. Harry Kane pressed really poorly in this game. But you can see how high up the pitch Tottenham are. So every time Fred got the ball, Lo Celso would be on him. You can see he's already running when the ball's sort of in play, and Fred has to pass backwards. So, and this is the thing, right? You can see Lo Celso's here, Ndombele's here. If this is Pogba turns into that space. But Fred doesn't do that. Fred's not that kind of player, so he just plays the ball backwards, and we end up being boxed into our own sort of third. So teams know what to do, and like we know what happened in the second half against Spurs, right? Like it got to the point where basically Ollie was like, "Okay, play it wide, and just have our fullbacks link up with Pogba and Bruno and bypass our midfield." That's how bad it is. From the time that you're not allowing our central midfielders to get on the ball enough so that they can focus on their sort of winning the ball back when we lose it, you can tell they're just not good enough on the ball. For a manager to make that decision, that's just crazy.
Kind of makes you wonder when you do watch that, you know, not to get at him, but kind of makes you wonder what Ollie's watching.
Ollie the thing is, Ollie knows. Like he wouldn't have made those sort of tactical changes. Like he knows exactly what the problem is with the midfield, but the way he sees it is not everything is about the attack. You know, sometimes you have to make sure you're defensively stable, and McFred makes us more defensively stable than any other combination that we have. So it's it's a lesser of two evils in that respect. But this image here sums up everything for me. This is Mason Greenwood. Okay, McFred are here, Mason Greenwood's here, and then you've got Maguire on the ball.
So tight, isn't it? So tight. So compact.
Yeah, and this is what happens, right? You have Maguire passing the ball to Greenwood, who's dropped deeper for the ball, whilst McFred are basically ignored. Fred's about to show for the ball here, but there's nothing really going on, so he passes it to 19-year-old Mason Greenwood, who's come deep for the ball, who's not great at distributing in the second third, really, and they would rather pass to him. What does that tell you? Do you see what I mean? So, like, 19-year-old Mason Greenwood is more trusted on the ball than McFred, and that for me is a massive issue. This one people should remember because obviously this is the game against Liverpool. It's the last game that we played, and I want to just sort of discuss this sort of game a little bit. So in this game, in the first half, Liverpool pressed very high and they pressed quite wide. And what this did was, because the three central midfielders were quite narrow and quite close together, Pogba and Bruno had a lot of space sort of in between the lines. And it caused an issue. There was a lot of empty space. They could get the ball to them. Even though Pogba didn't have a good game, and neither did Bruno really. So on the ball, they should have been a lot better. But if they were having one of their better days, Pogba and Bruno would have punished Liverpool in the first half. Unfortunately, they weren't very good. But in the second half, Liverpool made a tactical switch. And what they did was they actually did a narrow press. Instead of going high and wide, they went high and narrow. And again, they boxed in McTominay and Fred. And because of that, in the second half, Henderson played over 20 long balls as opposed to short ones to play out from the back. And Liverpool basically, Liverpool just caused a lot of issues. So 20 long balls in the second half compared to the first half where there were only 7. That means that in the second half, we didn't really play out from the back. Henderson was just lumping the ball forward. So you can see there's a problem with that. And that's why Liverpool took control of the midfield. When we lumped the ball forward, none of our forward players were really going to get hold of the ball in the air. So what ended up happening was we lost possession, and then they would come at us again. And that's why we ended up losing the midfield battle. And what ended up happening was Fred was taken off. Now, a lot of people sort of complained about this. They were like, why is Fred coming off and not McTominay? Well, the simple fact of the matter is McTominay will sit so that when Pogba goes into central midfield, Pogba can actually get forward when he needs to because he's better going forward than Fred. If you play Fred and Pogba, Pogba is the one that will have to sit because Fred doesn't hold in midfield. He will actually, his whole game is based around winning the ball back. So playing Pogba and Fred together in midfield would have actually made things worse. And you actually found that when McTominay held and Pogba came into the middle, we started to get control of the game more. So what Ollie did was the right thing. I don't want to hear people saying that he should have taken off McTominay. He rightfully took off Fred. So
yeah, but the funny thing is, he rightly did take off the right player, 100%. It just it's just frustrating when you see these clips, you know. Like,
yeah.
I think after a game when they go into analysis, analyze the game and stuff, you wonder who they take it on. You know, are they taking these instructions on?
The thing is, though, it's not about instructions; it's about the capability of the player.
Well,
do you know what I mean?
Well, sure.
Yeah, it's about being able, players actually being able to take hold of the game. When we played with Paul Pogba back in the middle, Paul Pogba showed for the ball. Do you see what I mean? And he got the ball and he turned into the space. So he will get the ball here and he will turn into space. Whereas Fred won't do that, and neither will McTominay. They'll just pass the ball back. So what Pogba brought to the team in terms of our build-up play was much, much better. And we looked better after Fred came off, did we not? We started to put pressure on them. And then obviously they hit us on the counter when Matic came on. So yeah, the decision was right from Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. People complaining about it are not understanding exactly what the combination of Fred and Pogba does. You usually find when they play together, Pogba's the one that sits and Fred is the one that pushes forward because he's the one that wins the ball high up the pitch. If you take that away from Fred and you stifle Fred in that way, you're going to see a situation where Fred has to make the sort of intelligent decisions where he has to read the game. And we all know that he doesn't do that particularly well.
He can't do that. So
yeah, he's better at tackling than what he is intercepting. So
what does that tell you?
it tells me he can't hold a midfield.
Yeah.
So Harshif is asking if, with better players, do Ollie tactics work better and make us better and make us a better team? And according to Twitter, of course.
Do you know, Pep came out and said that he needs the money to play to work his tactics. You know, that's why we've had the embarrassment of riches from football because we used to play 4-4-2. Remember? Do you know what I mean? When football was just 4-4-2, go out there. We had the better players and stuff. When you have the better players, it's easier to.
It's not even that, Bob's right. Midfielders now, they can't do everything. Back then, Scholes, Roy Keane, Vieira, Steven Gerrard, even Lampard. They were players that can get from box to box, and they could do everything. They could pass, they could shoot. They could tackle, they could do everything. They read the game well, they controlled midfields. Players don't do that now. They tend to have this thing where they're very good at one thing and average to bad at other things. And that for me is a problem with midfielders now. They're too specialists, and that's why you end up playing with a midfield three. So you'd have one defensive midfielder, and then you'd have either 2 8s, or you'd have an 8/10, or you'd have a 10 and an 8. It's ridiculous. So that's why people play 3 in midfield now, or they'd have a second striker who can help and drop into the midfield when required. So it is what it is. It's just the way the midfield is now. It's not like it was 10, 15 years ago,
Yeah, they're more athletes than actually football players.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the beginning of the goal we conceded against Spurs. So when I spoke about Fred and McTominay man-marking Ndombele and Lo Celso, this goal that we conceded started from the fact that Pogba's too narrow, first of all. And then there's Fred, who isn't tight enough to Lo Celso. And what he ends up doing is Lo Celso gets the ball here, and Fred is already running out of position to deal with Lo Celso. And then Ndombele is dropping in to try and support Lo Celso. So what you end up with is a situation where Fred has rashly gone out of position and left a lot of space, and Ndombele picks up the ball, and he's able to run into space. So here, again, Fred just not doing his job. He's either not concentrating or he's not assessing the danger. You can see how much space is given here. It's a lot of space here. So again, just an example of just very poor play. And yeah. And then there's this one. This one's really, really bad. The person who's circled here is Bruno Fernandes. McFred here. Bruno is deeper than our pivot. Like, this shouldn't be happening. Bruno dropping so deep literally comes down to the fact that, again, they're not progressing the ball up the pitch. So Martial has dropped deeper to try and support Bruno. Bruno plays it to him. Martial has now come out of his position, and there's a lot of space created in this sort of area here. And Martial will pass it back to Bruno Fernandes. Fred is in a position where he doesn't actually add anything here, because as we said before, he doesn't turn into space, right? So him being there doesn't add anything. And McTominay actually hasn't moved. You can see McTominay, you can see he hasn't moved at all. So what Fred should be doing is going into this space, so that when Bruno passes to McTominay, McTominay can play it into Fred in space. When you've got two of your forwards dropping deep, there's going to be space left open because players are going to follow them. So it's down to one of your midfielders to exploit that space because Bruno's dropped deep.
And also, you should, Fred and McTominay should have the balls to be like, Bruno, go away. Stop being, go away because you're coming into our space. Then Martial should be our number 9.
Yeah.
So when they do get the ball, they've got to come back anyway because there's no going forward. There's no outlet. It's all the communication at the same time. If your striker's dropping so deep, you've got to ask yourself, why is he dropping so deep to get on the ball? Because we're not giving him the ball, and you're not getting, as the centre midfielder, you're not getting on the ball yourself. So it's like a domino effect, though, isn't it? We see it all the time. Every game, Bruno coming down and Bruno coming so deep just to win the ball.
Yeah, absolutely. Hardship again. It's peak when Luke Shaw is our most important ball progressing player. Nullify him, our whole build up falls apart, and combine that without Maguire, we are absolutely dead. Yeah, absolutely. They're a big part.
It's the same. Man mark Bruno, you get the same outcome.
Yeah, it's a problem. This is why we need Paul Pogba in the middle, but unfortunately we don't have the defensive midfielder to actually, hold a midfielder and let Pogba do what he's good at. JB thinks Wesley Fofana will make the France squad for the Euros. Very good defender. Yeah, he is a good defender. I think France have like a massive amount of good centre backs at the moment, don't they? Like, they have Konate, they have Koundé, Fofana, they have Upamecano, they have Varane. They've got a lot of players that they can play in there. Kind of spot for choice, really, aren't they? Hardship again. Benacer and Locatelli, Brozovic would be ideal. Double pivot. Given both Milan's club's financial situation and Locatelli's preference to move to a better team. Strong on and off the ball movement, ideal. I really like Benacer. I think he's a very, very good player. His dribbling ability is excellent, and his eye for a pass is very, very good. I really like him. He's not the best long passer, but short passing, he's very, very good.
I don't think he can hold the midfield on his own.
No, I think he's just talking about in a double pivot alongside a defensive midfielder. So if you, say for example, we got rid of Paul Pogba, and then we got rid of, say, Fred. Say we got rid of both of them, and you had a central defensive midfielder come in, Benacer would play alongside them. I think that's what he's saying. I don't think he thinks that they're going to hold a midfield like Benacer. But yeah, no, they're very good players actually. All right, last little segment is going to be why doesn't Ole Gunnar Solskjaer play Donny van de Beek? Now, Donny for me is not a player that should be played in double pivot. So when I first started streaming, I didn't really know why Ole didn't play Donny. I saw him play a few times, a couple games for Ajax and at the game against Real Madrid, where he was a lot more advanced. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go back and sort of watch a few of his games. And I actually learned very quickly why he doesn't play him in the double pivot. And it comes down to this, right? So his strengths involve movement, pressing, short passing, intelligence. He's tactically versatile and he's a fantastic finisher. He's actually he's a very good finisher. And his weaknesses are long passing, progressing from deep, and creativity. Obviously, these stats are from this season. You can see he's only made 17 appearances in the Premier League and 14 of them have been from the bench. And we know that he's only had like 4 or 5 minute cameos. So these stats are a bit skewed, to be fair to him, but I put them in anyway. If you look at his heat map, he's very sporadic. He doesn't tend to stay in one position. He he does like to pass it and move it. He's not a player that holds onto the ball very long at all. He's very much a 1-2 touch sort of football player, but his movement is very, very good, and he does exploit space really, really well. But the thing that stood out to me was this. This is Donny's sort of incisive passes sort of graph, and basically it tells you everything you need to know, really. All of Donny's successful passes, apart from one, were made in the final third. That's insane, right? Incisive passes, so passes that will, sort of break open lines.
So what does that tell you, though?
It tells me that he's a cam. That's what it tells me, and he's not a player that plays in the pivot at all. When I've watched him play for United a few times, and even when I went back and watched the Ajax games, I watched a game against Getafe, and he was playing in the double pivot. Ajax played a 4-2-3-1 in this game, and he made less progressive passes than the player next to him, who was the defensive midfielder. Less. He wasn't progressing the ball in the second third. You can't have someone playing in the pivot doing that.
So it makes you think, why did you buy him? What for?
Yeah. The thing is, if you play him as cover for Bruno Fernandes as a different sort of option, that's fine. And arguably, when we had these issues on the right side before Greenwood just stepped up and has been very, very good this season, you could play Donny on the right side. He will exploit those spaces in the final third. What I don't agree with is this idea that he should be playing in the pivot. He's not that kind of player. He's very much a pop it off player. Like he's one of those players where if you give him the ball, if he looks ahead and he sees that there's no one moving, he will just play the ball backwards. He's not a player that will hold on to the ball. He's not a dribbler per se. Like Paul Pogba, for example, he's been accused of holding on to the ball for too long. If you actually look at the movement ahead of Paul Pogba, you'll see no one's really moving. So he'll hold on to it and he'll try and dribble past and he might lose the ball. Donny van de Beek doesn't do that. He'll get the ball and he'll play it back. If he doesn't see someone by the time he gets his second touch, the ball's being played backwards or sideways. He's not a progressive passer. If he doesn't see the movement, it's not gonna work. So for me, Donny van de Beek is not someone who should be playing in the pivot. He's someone who needs to be played further up the pitch. And I'm going to show you a few images of what he does because I think it's really, really good. It's actually quite Frank Lampard-like in terms of the way he goes into the box.
Yep.
So this one here, Ziyech's actually the one on the ball here, right? You can see there's not a lot of space between the two centre-backs. Donny's actually in a position where you don't think he's got any kind of advantage, right? So Ziyech's got the ball. Ziyech knows exactly what Donny's going to do. Donny's the only one moving. When I watched this clip, he was the only one moving. You can see players are standing still. They're not really doing much. And Ziyech passes the ball in, and Donny van de Beek gets the ball. He turns into the box, and he shoots and scores. Now, this is the sort of thing that Donny likes to do. He likes to get into a bit of space. If he gets an advantage, and he will punish you for it. He's that kind of player. He's not a player that will progress the ball. He's not a creative player, basically. He's not going to do the Ziyech thing here. He's the person that will receive the ball and try and shoot. That's what Donny does. And again, here, you can see the ball's wide. Donny starts on the edge of the box. Ball's played in to the back post. It's laid off to him. And look at what his final position is. In the middle of the goal. A striker's position.
Yep.
You know what I mean? He anticipates. He knows roughly where the ball's going to land. He knows what he wants to do in the box. So his movement and his finishing are very, very good.
JB says, I don't think Ollie wanted to sign Donny in the first place. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, I do. I think what ended up happening was, so my understanding is that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer wanted Jack Grealish and Jadon Sancho, and Jack Grealish getting both of them is something the club either didn't want to do or couldn't afford to do, whatever it is. And so I think he was promised Jadon Sancho because everyone at the club believed that he was going to go. So then he compromised and said, okay, Jack Grealish is an attacking player. We'll bring you Donny van de Beek instead, who's a cheaper option, and we'll get you Jadon Sancho. And what ended up happening was we ended up getting neither because our board is a joke. So, yeah, it's not the ideal situation. If we weren't going to get Jack Grealish, for example, we should have gone for a defensive midfielder or a centre-back. The fact that we got neither is a joke. But yeah, I feel sorry for Donny because he's not being played the way he should. And when he's played as a 10, some of the movement that he makes, people aren't finding him. There's no Ziyech in our team to actually find him. And obviously at Chelsea, there's no Donny to sort of be found. I find that same thing with your movement and the front three. I think Werner's movement is decent, but he has a habit of not staying on side. and when he gets the ball, he's not very productive with it, I find. But Donny van der Beek's movement and his combination play with Ziyech was something that was huge for Ajax. And then the final sort of example, again, Kluivert's got the ball on the left side. Donny's on the edge of the box, plays the ball into the box, and Donny van der Beek is literally in the middle of the goal again. Do you see what I mean? You can see the sort of player that Donny van der Beek is. He's not what people think. He's not an 8 or a 6. He can play as an 8 in a box, like a box-to-box role. He can't hold, and he shouldn't be played deeper. So if he's going to play as an 8, again, he needs a central defensive midfielder that will give him the freedom to go and do what he wants to do in the final third. He's not going to play alongside McTominay or Fred, because he vacates his position and leaves them on their own, and they can't hold a midfield very well. So, yeah.
What Man United fans need to be careful is, for example, people will say, if you guys buy Basuma in the summer, people will say, well, Ollie, you have a DM, why are you still playing with a double pivot? Without really looking into the context of Basuma is not, can't sit and hold a midfield by himself. I mean, Rice can. He's physical, he's intelligent, and he's also good on the ball. But indeed, he's not the best on the ball, but he's, as a DM, he's probably better than Rice. You've got someone like, for example, Locatelli out there in Italy. He's also young, but he is quite mature, and he's a leader for Sassuolo. Then you have the likes of Benassor and Brozovic, but I don't think either of them can really sit on their own.
They're not. They would be playing alongside the DM, so they would be a replacement for Fred, I would say. They wouldn't be a replacement for, say, McTominay, because McTominay is the one that usually sits out of the two. You'd say Fred is the 8 and McTominay would be the 6, but really and truly, McTominay he's not a natural 6. You know what I mean? So there's a problem there already. But yeah, no, I agree. I like Benacer. I think he's a very good player. I like him a lot.
Yeah, but the only problem would be is that United fans would still expect too much. I think who you bring in, unless they are an actual DM. So again, Ndidi, Rice, Locatelli is the only real 3 I can think of that would be available. If you don't bring either one of those 3, then you'd be bringing in someone Benassor or Basuma, people who play in a pivot. I don't think any of them can play on their own. Camavinga, he's very young. You can't let him sit on his own in the Premier League for Manchester United. Chelsea played against him this season in the Champions League group. He's talented, but he's extremely raw. And having him being paired with McTominay or Fred is not going to be any help to him at all.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the only young player that I would be happy with us signing is Declan Rice. He's 21, but you wouldn't have thought he's a very mature, very composed player as well. Very much a leader. He's a captain. He's a captain as well for West Ham, which is big. Taking over from Mark Noble. Whatever people think of Mark Noble, he was their captain. So it's a big thing that Declan Rice is a captain of West Ham. And to be quite honest with you, without Declan Rice, they've really struggled. A lot of people said that Souček was the one that was sort of the big boy in the midfield, and that he was the one that they would miss more. Absolutely not. Declan Rice does a lot in that midfield. So, yeah, I agree.
The past was a month that he's been out injured. West Ham have still scored goals, but a lot of their games have been like 3-3s and 3-2s. They'll go up 3-0 quickly, but because they can't sit and protect, then they're just constantly getting exposed because they have to play Noble with Souček, and Souček does this thing where he gets forward and gets goals, but it leaves the midfield exposed. And I could see that happening at Man United. Even if you bring in quality, because there's no quality around. Like, for example, if Rice has to play in midfield with Fred, and if Fred, like, for example, that Fred goal that people blame Maguire for, something like that maybe not exactly like that, but something like that will happen where a goal will get conceded and people will blame Declan Rice, but it won't be his fault. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
They'll blame Ndidi or whatever. Like fans always do this; they find ways to scapegoat, but
yeah, no,
you
they
don't look at
absolutely
the
do.
actual problem.
Yeah, they do. I agree. Um, yeah, I agree with Harshit for this. Donny being an off-the-ball creator and Brennan on-the-ball creator. I think people underestimate how important movement is in like just in general on the pitch. You know, half of the work is done by the passer, but the other half is done by the receiver, and that involves their movement. Too many people don't realize this, and basically, too many football players now they're very static. When things aren't going their way, they barely move. They expect everything to come to feet. Sometimes just exploit some space, and you'll get into a very good position. So yeah, there is a problem. But yeah, guys, thank you for watching the video. Really appreciated the comments and stuff. Agree with quite a lot of what people were saying. I mean, my conclusion of it is that I think Fred is a better player than McTominay, but I think they're both not good enough. I don't think people should really be arguing over who's better out of the two. There's no McTominay tax, there's no Fred tax. It's all nonsense. Like, as far as I'm concerned, they're both not good enough. And yeah, I just can't wait for the day that we don't get to see them on the pitch as much, if I'm being honest with you. But yeah, guys, thank you for watching the video. Please like, share, and subscribe. If you're new, and hopefully we'll see you. We'll see you tomorrow. Obviously, there's Next Gen tomorrow, and there's also an Ask the Audience sort of show called Fan Views, where you can basically just call in and have your say, speak about whatever you want, football related. Obviously, don't want to speak about random things that are quite controversial in the media. We want to speak about football. So yeah, hopefully you guys can tune into
What
that.
time will that be? Let them know what time.
Probably 10:30. 10:30 will probably be. Next Gen, I believe, is on around 7. But yeah, you're hosting that, aren't you, Prime? Next Gen tomorrow.
I think so.
Yeah.
I see Miami. Yeah. So yeah. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I think the last few days we've been late doing streams. We apologize, but the support we've been getting from viewers and people in the live chat and the comments and interactions has been really amazing.
It's been
so
really
we appreciate
good.
that.
Yeah, thank you guys. Really appreciate the support. But yeah, take care, everyone.
Right.